All right, so today we have a special treat. We're going to be talking about the importance of peer and family support for recovery. Today's presenters are going to be Michelle and Darryl Lennon, and I'm your host, Robin Harvey. And if you need anything, just raise your hand and I'll try to take care of you. Go ahead and go to the next slide, Andrew. As most of you know, there's several ways to engage in our webinars. When you're ready to speak, raise your hand and we'll unmute you. You'll then need to unmute yourself so you can be heard. Hi, Stephanie Goodwin from Chicago Commons. Next, feel free to type your comments in the group chat and make sure it goes to everyone. You can see on the screen, it's a little down caret there. And last, sometimes our webinars are really crowded and the topic is so awesome today that a lot of you may have questions. A lot of you may raise your hands. Please be patient with us. If you'd like to bring your voice into the room without speaking, please feel free to do that in the chat. All right, agreements. So Be Strong Families webinars run on agreements. We're all going to speak from our own experiences using I statements. We're going to use the golden rule and treat everybody the way you want to be treated. Full presence, no multitasking. Give yourself a treat today. 1 hour of the webinar just to take care of you. And with that being said, if you need a minute, take a minute. If you agree to these agreements, if you could write I agree in the chat, that would be helpful for everyone. Be Strong Families does these agreements so we can ensure that our webinars are a safe space for people to learn and to share and to grow together. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Awesome. All right, I'm going to give you just a couple more seconds there. Awesome. All right, Andrew, I think that we can go ahead and we can get started. Go ahead, Michelle.
All right. So, hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Lennon, and I am a family member of somebody that is affected by addiction, and that's my whole family is. We're here today to talk about the importance of peer and family support for recovery, and I'll let my husband introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Darryl Lennon. I am a person in short-term and long-term recovery. What that means to me today is that I have short-term goals and long-term goals to live a healthy life in recovery. And today we're going to talk to you about our life experience doing just that.
Next slide. Oh, I probably should say who that is on this slide, right? That's me and Darryl, obviously. And then little Darryl is actually the tall Darryl next to his dad. And then Corey, who is actually our oldest, he's 23 now. And then our daughter, who's kind of like our little princess and just this amazing kid. She's now 19, a sophomore actually at SNHU, studying business administration, which we can't figure that out because both, Darryl and I work in social services pretty much. So yeah, that's our kids.
Michelle, before you and Darryl continue on, I just really want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and your life and your family. It is so vital to hear from people with lived experience. So we really appreciate you. We all grow when we share our stories. Thanks.
Thank you. So we kind of just knew that we had about a half hour or so to talk with you today. And, thinking about what we have been through, what I can tell you, it is not what we expected, not for either one of us. When I look at ourselves on our wedding day, I think, oh my gosh, we're like young and excited and so in love and, just had the world, all in front of us and so many positive expectations for our lives. And it was basically that week that Darryl suffered a major pain incident, and it changed everything. And Darryl, do you want to talk a little bit about what that time was like for us?
I can talk a little bit about it. I mean, if we don't know what we don't know, and had I had known I was going to go through those pain issues, I'm quite certain that we probably wouldn't have gotten married at all. That's something, maybe some of you know what it's like to live with pain or chronic pain, but you know, it really helps turn you into kind of a shell of somebody you don't really want to be. And then, you know, trying to be a family member, a father, a husband at the same time, you know, and really want recovery. And at the end of the day, you know, I really just wanted pain relief, and what that looks like in our systems that we have built today.
Yeah. And so, you know, for us, it was not what either of us expected. And, you know, and for a long time, it was hard for me to hear that from my husband, like, I wouldn't have married you. But what is behind those words is we wouldn't have wanted to put each other through the pain that we went through at each other's hands. Because I was definitely the person that was going to force solutions on my husband. I thought I knew it all. You know, I had been a family support specialist for my career, and actually a pastor of a church. So I thought I knew everything there was to know about family support. And what I came to know is that working with individuals with addiction is different, very different. And, you know, I often feel like the family support world has not been given what they need to work with families affected by addiction, because we were just so programmed differently than what the realities of addiction really are. So for both of us, you know, we had these expectations, and for both of us, what we ran into with Darryl's substance use disorder was not what we expected. And, you know, just to back up, Darryl fell 40 feet from a roof and survived the fall. And that alone was miraculous, but it took him a year to learn to walk again. And then right at the time when we were getting married, you know, he had been in recovery for a while. You know, that accident happened in 2009. We just did not see what was coming. And he went through a period of time where he had hip surgery. He had 6 hip dislocations during that time, you know, and pain medication is what the answer was from the doctors. And it just set the addiction running again. So we went through a lot of, you know, of all the behavior that comes with addiction, and, you know, having to really learn, for me, to live with someone who used drugs illicitly, and what that was and what that was like. The fear, you know, the concern, the fear of the reputation for our family. We were, you know, I live a very public life because of the jobs that I have. And, you know, I often was trying to balance both the reputation of our family and then the concern for my husband's health. I mean, there were days that he was crying out for Jesus to take his life because his pain was so bad. And like, it was so difficult for me to handle at times. And of course, awful for him to live with. And, you know, being a man, I would say the pride about not being able to work, having to lay around in bed, you know, all those things just weighed on him so much. And even that was painful. So we were both figuring out how to manage life when life just seemed so unmanageable. You think that's fair, Darryl? I want to make sure I'm the talker of the two of us. So. Yeah. Anything to add to that? No. All right, next slide. Yeah. So I would say, you know, to say it was a bumpy ride is like, you know, just not even close to how, you know, tough that time was for both of us. He was in a wheelchair for quite some time. There's a picture of him in the wheelchair, you know, at church, you know, trying even just to manage life. And at the same time, you know, we have 3 kids. You know, for my, like, I was thinking about how I was there for every soccer game, every basketball game for my son, Corey. And then by the time Lindsay was getting to the place of going to all these things, my life was so consumed with managing what was going on with Darryl's health and my full-time job and my part-time job and holding the household together. And also trying to protect Darryl from my overwhelm. Because, you know, the last thing he needed was to feel even worse about everything that was happening. And it always made him feel worse. You know, just to even see me shovel snow would make him feel worse, you know? And so there was a lot of stress that came just from living life, just from, you know, doing the things that needed to be done. So there was a lot of pain in that reality for both of us. because, on the one hand, I was aggravated that I had to do everything and felt that way at times. And then, on the flip side of it, of course, I didn't want him to feel like he was letting me down. He felt that way just by the nature of everything that was happening, I would say. The blessings of it was where I saw the importance of the family support piece come in. And it wasn't formal supports. And I think that was something, like, I work in family support. So the importance of knowing where to go for resources when you need them became really important. But it was my social network. It was those healthy social connections that really helped get me through a lot of stuff. And so there were a lot of blessings that came out of that time too. It was seeing his, Darryl's mom stand by us no matter what, and by him no matter what. That was huge for me because I had somebody that I could talk to about, the realities of what I was going through, that I couldn't talk to Darryl about even. And that was even like a source of grief for me, because when we were first married, we were so in love. We shared everything. We thought, we were going to take the addiction world by storm, and we did trainings together and things like that. We did a lot of stuff together, and had a lot of plans, and a lot of that got really derailed when he went through all these health conditions that led to his addiction, becoming active in our lives again. You want to talk a little bit about what that time was like for you, Darryl?
I think that one thing that, I think that was important to know is that even people that were supposedly really good friends, had the mindset that I shouldn't have any more chances, and that if she wanted to know the real me, that I was just some guy addicted to drugs, that was the real me. So like, you get used to the world just telling you that you're nothing but just a drug addict. So it was something different in the family supports. Like, usually, like, we know that this thing that we live with, or at least I know that this thing I live with, is chronic and progressive. And then in my experience, when the chronic and progressive part would show up, the world would tell me to get lost. And like, it's quite the feeling, not only to know that you're not living right, but then you have nowhere to turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Bumpy ride. Next slide. One of the things that I came to realize too is I sometimes told Darryl, like, I felt like his addiction was like a second woman in our relationship, that he would do things to protect the addiction more than his family, that his relationship with his addiction would take priority over all of us, and how, like, I would get partial honesty. And he would say things to me like, without trust, there is no relationship, when it was him that was like protecting his addiction. And it was like such frustration, but also, recognizing that I couldn't force solutions on him, that just wasn't working for me. And I would say, that there's that individual recovery and individual support that peers are really good at giving. And Darryl has his peer support people in his life, and that's his individual recovery. But then there's the family context too, that there has to be this family recovery too. And so what he and I talked about is, what is it that I need for my own recovery, as we kind of grow past, some of the hurts of the past that came with the behaviors that come with addiction. Al-Anon helped me greatly. I went for a couple of years, actually, weekly. And I would say, if Darryl has any reoccurrences, that's going to be one of my first things that gets added back into my self-care stuff. He mentioned the chronic and progressive. I think at some point when we were getting married, I thought, he was done with addiction. Like somehow he had been in recovery long enough that, oh, this is never going to be part of our lives again. We've conquered it. We're going to move on. And for some people, the chronic and progressive side of addiction does rear its ugly head when circumstances meet opportunity and things go wrong. And I had to learn, what does that mean for me, as far as what were my boundaries going to be around that? And, and I've talked to him about, the times that I've had to figure out, where is that line for me? because I did cross boundaries and I did compromise values and I did things that I never thought I would do as a result of trying to hold my marriage together or to see him suffer less or to try to manage the damage, and realize that my life was getting unmanageable. And there were pieces of myself that I was compromising that I was not okay compromising. And, we really kind of worked through that and different boundaries were set. And there was a time when like he came off the checkbook, and there were different things that he had to tolerate in me long enough for me to recover. Like we're to the point where, we've recognized that there's trust. Like I trust that my husband will never cheat on me, but there are other pieces that I haven't yet fully learned to trust yet, so, things like he's not on my car, or he's not on my house, and I somehow during that process of going through this stuff, I took ownership of things that maybe I shouldn't have, but I felt I had to in order to protect the health and being of my family. Because if his addiction took him too far, we could lose the house. Those are the kind of fears that kind of operated in me. But also the experience of the past told me, well, that's a reality for some people that they, lose whole retirement funds trying to manage a loved one's addiction or their recovery and stuff like that. So we had to come to terms with, my fear, his pride, different things to figure out how could we maintain our family and still live together or live apart at times to be able to not quit on each other. And that's been a challenge at times, I would say. Darryl, you want to share you can share all my stuff, Darryl, about how awful I was at times. I'm good with that because I feel like family members love each other so much that we do try to force solutions. And we also have been so programmed wrongly to think that so much of this involves choice that doesn't, that we get lost in it. And, just thinking about the family context, I mentioned Al-Anon is like Alateen and then some support groups, but it's hard to find support groups for youth. And so what we figured out is the informal networks mean just as much, so that context of recovering as an individual with peer support being so important. And then the family context. What kind of support do your kids need? And within the family, for me, my daughter there, she's a cheerleader for SNHU now. She was a cheerleader back, as a little girl at a cheer gym. And then for Plymouth High School where we live. And for me, like that family support was my informal social networks, taking her to cheer practice every day, or giving her rides home or taking her to the hotel room for competitions when I couldn't go because I was home making sure my husband was okay, or if he was, in bed with the hip surgeries. He had three surgeries during that time period, that I was home taking care of my husband. So I couldn't be as involved in my daughter's cheer career as I had been in the kids' basketball careers, things like that. But yeah. Darryl, you want to add to that? No? That's a picture of him, by the way, Robin, when we were in Chicago. Not Chicago, I'm sorry, Philadelphia with Northeast Treatment Centers when we were doing focus groups for the Recovering Together cafes.
Oh, I love that. And I typed in the chat. I didn't know if you were tracking the chat, but when you were talking about the choice, it just reminds me of the whole just say no.
Yeah. I'm
actually choice.
Yep. I'm going to talk about that before we finish out.
Awesome.
I got to watch the time here, huh? Next slide.
You just keep going. This is really riveting and it's super helpful to me.
Yeah. One of the things about peer support and family support is that a customized approach really works best. One of the things that we found that was so damaging to our family was when systems tried to prescribe what Darryl needed to recover, because it just did not work. We found that, they wanted him to go to meetings, and like I was in the doctor's office with him, like crying. I'm like, he can't even make it down the stairs to use the bathroom at night. And you're wanting him to go into church basements and different locations, like he can't do that, and they're like, well, he should find a way. Well, that's not an answer. It was so frustrating. Or, when we had some engagement with the court system, it was the same kind of thing. Oh, you need to go to meetings. Well, one of the relapses came because there were people outside those meetings that are piranhas, and my husband sometimes has social anxiety. So it's not always fun, to go into those meetings alone, and not always safe. There were so many reasons why that wasn't a good fit for him, and talking with I statements as his wife, I wanted him to get what was going to work to support his recovery, not what he was being prescribed by people who did not know him. And so that was very, very difficult for me to tolerate, especially coming from this, system that's supposed to be trauma informed and person centered. Well, it's great to say that and to be trained in that, but if you don't operationalize it, you're doing damage to people. And I was so angry at times. Darryl, you want to share on that?
Share on being so angry with systems.
Yeah. Or just like what worked for you wasn't necessarily what people told you.
Well, maybe share the story about Lindsay getting her appendix out. That would be like a good story about how, like.
Yeah. So just for an example, we've had a couple of run-ins with our local hospital. One time, Darryl went there for services, and all the provider said to him was, "Has your wife left you yet?" That's all they said for support. It was awful. Yep. It was awful. Because, with the hip dislocations and the addiction, he had been to the emergency room a couple of times. That's all they said. We had our daughter there for an emergency appendectomy, and she comes out and she's in the recovery room, and they're going to give her opioids like right away. They're going into the IV. And I just said, hold on. I said, what is that you're giving her? And they told me, and I looked at my daughter, I said, Lindsay, you know what opioids have done to our family? Do you feel like you're in that much pain that you need them? And she's like, I don't think so. And I said, yeah, please don't give those to her. And the nurse looked at me like I was evil and like I was this horrible mother. And well, she just had major surgery. That's what she said to me. I said, but she doesn't need them. And so the doctor said, he comes over and he's doing something. I think he just washed his hands or something, and leans over and talks to my daughter and says to her, well, do you want some Tylenol to, take the edge off? She's like, no, I think I'm good. I'm just a little uncomfortable. I don't think I need anything, And so we are so conditioned, by systems that even if we know better, we often accept people just kind of talking to us like that. And only because I'm so educated around this stuff did I put my hand up and say, hold on, and it was that same hospital. But when I was thinking of the customized approach works best, looking at little kids, that's Corey and Lindsay when they were really little, that sometimes it's not Al-Anon, it's like a play group where you're with other moms that are not judgmental, that you can be in a place where people care more about you than what they hear gossip wise. What are the needs and who in the family needs what? Like, we can't know that and just say, go to an Al-Anon meeting or an Alateen meeting or a 12-step meeting or something until we really know or ask the question, what does a family need? I didn't need one more meeting. I was having trouble just getting to the grocery store, in between working my jobs and taking care of my kids and making sure my husband was all set. When he was in the hospital, I was driving to Dartmouth like every night after work. And it was like an hour and a half drive there and an hour and a half drive home from the hospital after spending an hour with him, at the time. I needed help, like getting my mail, making sure, oh my God, I forgot to pay the electric bill, thinking about, like those rides to practice and things like that. Those things all reduce family stress. And when you reduce family stress, you make the environment better for the person that is recovering. And sometimes I think we don't think about that when we think about addiction health, because if I'm having a bad day, I'm not nice to Darryl sometimes, because I think in family dynamics, that's what happens, right? We get used to each other and we can be not nice to each other when things aren't good. And I was already walking on eggshells all the time because of what he was going through in his own pain. And even then, often families don't know what they need for support, because so much of it was new to me, as far as experiencing it myself. I didn't know what I was going to need until the day came and something needed to be done a lot of times, because it was like that hectic pace of trying to keep up with everything all the time. And I would say, when we ask people what they need, do it authentically, and realize that, when somebody has cancer, people will make casseroles and drop stuff off to your house. When you have a family member that's suffering with addiction, they say, shh, don't talk about it, hide it, and so, or leave your husband, kick him out, those kind of things. And it's so painful. It's so painful. Next slide. So one of the things that, I look back and I realize some of the things that work is that involving the family in recovery doesn't have to be a formal thing. We were setting up a recovery center in Franklin, New Hampshire, and that's my daughter and one of her friends. And like, she spent the day putting desks together with us, not anything formal of like going to a recovery meeting, but she's doing something to advance the cause, and it's made her feel better. One of the things that like made me so happy is like, she went to SNHU and they closed the whole campus down last year for COVID. So she did a lot of her classes at our kitchen table. Well, it also meant she was portable. So she was able to go on a sailing trip with Darryl and our associate pastor in Florida, and like their relationship reconnected and kind of blossomed again. And like now she was like wishing that COVID would shut her school down again, because Darryl and Paul are going to Arizona, for the winter months. And that goes back to that customized approach, right? We know that Darryl's pain gets much, much worse in the cold weather. He got it. What is that camper you bought? Like an 80 something. And he and Paul have been renovating it. So that in Discovery, you can hang out in Cracker Barrel parking lots for free. And does his ministry stuff, talking to, in fact, the picture in Philadelphia, he had been talking to somebody who was experiencing homelessness, and bought her donuts while he was sitting there. And that's what he loves to do, is do that type of outreach to people, to make them feel human, because he knows what it's like to be treated as if you're not human, that you're a number, or not even with a name sometimes. But involving your family in recovery, I think it's a powerful way that people can do something. And one of the things that we saw as a result of her being involved, in understanding addiction and the things that, you want to prevent, like the thing in the hospital that I mentioned, was we were at a memorial service for someone, and actually our next door neighbor who had passed away of an overdose. And it was my daughter who put her arm around his daughter and said, if you need anything, I'm here. And, this doesn't change anything for me. That, we loved your dad, that kind of thing. And so even among the kids that experience this, that peer support is just such a powerful thing. Did you want to add anything to that, Darryl? I was thinking even like, well, okay, go ahead. I know we don't have a whole lot of time. Next slide. One of the things that we found is that everyone benefits from education, and it can be very hard to get it in. Peer and family support can provide education for both the individual and the family affected. Higher levels of training can be beneficial and be an asset to recovery. Because here's the thing, even with all the education that we have, and Darryl and I are both trained recovery coaches, we've trained families on recovery basics, all kinds of things, we still trip up all the time. And, we've had to realize that boundaries help, but as a family, we're not good at boundaries, that we find that we say things we regret. And we're even still learning to manage that. Like Darryl actually I want to say just yesterday, I snapped about something and we got off the phone together and he called me right back. He's like, you know what? I'm not good with how that conversation just ended. Can we talk about this a little bit more? And then we can get back to a good place. Sometimes, I recognize, when, like I said, I don't have to engage in every fight that I'm invited to, but I also don't have to keep pushing buttons. And so we still learn, what is the intention, I guess, is what I often think about, is what is the intention? Because I don't want to increase stress in my family, and sometimes my mouth gets away from me and I get aggravated and I say things that are meant to be painful to him. And I start, things that don't normally bother me, I'll stop pulling them out of my back pocket and start throwing them at him just because I feel like I have to defend myself, and that's not who I want to be. And so I have to really look at that a lot and kind of measure how I'm doing, monitor how I'm doing. See, am I overtired? Have I not eaten? How's my self-care? Oh, it's in the toilet. I've been working way too much, and look at my own stuff and how I react to some of the things that go on. Recognizing that, family, we do tend to take stuff out on each other, and the message we give very often is not that we love each other, but that we're so aggravated and frustrated with each other that we're just not in a good place. And I would say most recently we just recognize that, sometimes we need a break from each other, so that we can love each other well. And that's been like an interesting journey for me. I don't know, Darryl, if you want to say anything about that. No way, not touching that one, huh? So one of the things about education that I found is people who struggle with life in general sometimes don't know where those struggles come from. And I think that's very true for people that are affected by substance use disorder. When I think about learning from each other, I love the Recovering Together Cafe decks, because you can be the loved one who has had all the issues with somebody else's behavior, or you can be the person that has, problematic substance use going on in their lives, or somebody that's recovering from that, made a choice to kind of leave that problem behavior behind. But you can be in the same room and have those healthy conversations because of the protective factors that surround the conversation, that are in the cafes. And that's been a really good experience for me, because what happens is I don't end up in the same group as my husband, but I get to talk to people that have the same kind of experiences, and I'm not judging them at all, the way I have judged my husband, because he's my husband, so it's been very beneficial to me to be in some of those conversations. And I was thinking about the education that I get from them, makes things kind of come to light about my own behaviors and how maybe I've said things, done things, created an environment that isn't conducive to Darryl telling me the truth or telling me when he's struggling, because he knows he's going to get ripped apart by me or whatever in the past, try to be better, and I think when we know better, we do better, Next slide. Robin had mentioned the just say no thing. This is what we've all been programmed with, whether you're somebody in recovery, somebody affected by substance use, somebody using drugs, or, just in our society. And we're naive to think that the programming doesn't affect us. Addiction is not a matter of willpower or a moral failing, but that is what we have been told for decades. We have been told that. And I think about that, this is your brain on drugs. I don't know if you remember the cracked egg on the fry pan and all that. Some of the anti-cannabis ads that showed people's heads blowing up and stuff. I look back at that and think how crazy was some of those things that were put out there, and how we just kind of accepted it all. And we created this divide. So it really became not a war on drugs, but a war on people, people that use substances, people that have been affected by addiction, all of that. And because we were programmed that way, even people who are in recovery, I hear them often say, well, I just quit. Why can't they? Or, I left it behind. I outgrew it. They should be able to too. But what we don't realize is substance use disorders run a gamut of kind of like a continuum of where somebody lies. But the disease of addiction is a disease. There's a brain changes that occur in a brain, and people do not choose that. And I just got into this with one of my senators, actually, because he seemed to think that addiction is invited into people's lives of their own volition. And having that discussion with him, that's absolutely not true. And there's a lot of research, for 60 years that's been telling us otherwise, but we've been programmed with this idea that it's a moral failing. And so that's where our go-to place is. And the way I describe this to people is how, I'm just looking at the time, how if I hold your head underwater in a bathtub, you know that you can survive without taking a breath, probably for 5 minutes. But the compulsion in your brain to take that breath is so great, it's going to override your logic, and you're going to inhale that water, even though logically you know you are going to drown if you inhale that water. For me, I could understand that, but in that other part of me, I'm like, if he only loved me enough, he would not do this. And so that programming affects us all. So I said, so that's how it affects me, right? That I would go to that place if he loved me, if he loved our kids, if he cared at all about what we could lose, which was very condemning. And I didn't want to be that person. I mean, faith has played a huge part in my recovery. I'll say that. And about how, I love my husband through choice, and directing my faith in a positive direction and things like that. But really coming to terms with how I had internalized that addiction is a moral failing, was a big part of my learning process. But it was also a big part of Darryl's, and Darryl, I don't know if you could talk a little bit, like I was thinking about how you went through the classes about learning about the brain science and what kind of impact that had on you.
For me, learning about the brain science was the real game changer, because I'd say, I fell off that roof in New Hampshire in 2009. Immediately listened to who I thought the experts in the field were about the addictive nature, about pain meds. In 2009, they said things like, you have a 0.0001% chance of becoming addicted to these pain meds that you take. So, I thought they were the experts in the field. And, you make decisions knowing that you have the best information that you think you have, but what happens when that information isn't the best information? I had to step out only because at my other job too, taking care of an 85-year-old guy, he just woke up and he kind of forgot that I had this webinar thing. So I just had to go in and tell him what I was doing again. And all right, so what, Michelle, I'm sorry, what did you ask me to?
Just about how like learning about the brain science, about emotions and pain and addiction and stuff, how that was like the game changer for you.
So yeah, and in 2009, they didn't have a lot of the same recovery supports they have in our state now. That we didn't have very many, so you had to kind of. I went to Massachusetts where I first started to receive help there. Hold on one second. All right, you good? Okay. So and in 2009, I couldn't make it back to my state without being high. And I fully believed that I wanted recovery. I'd do great. I'd finish their 30-day program, and then I just could not make it back. And it did not make sense until I learned the brain science of it, that the brain was an organ, that it could be affected, that I couldn't understand why simple tasks seemed overwhelming. My comprehension seemed fogged. Come to find out that, I didn't know it would take, upwards of 18 months for the brain of the organ to detox off some harder things like methamphetamine, cocaine, or opioids. So learning that kind of stuff kind of let me know what was going on. So then I'd have, the world would call it triggers or reminders. And I mean, I think, as people in recovery, we have reminders every day, depending on what your poison is. If you have to go to the grocery store, it be alcohol, or, if, you have to go to the pharmacy to get medication, you know, and how do we live life on life's terms like that? And learning the brain science of it was really a game changer, because it allowed me to give myself a break, that it wasn't a moral failing. It didn't make me a bad person. Actually, some of the best people I've ever met are people that, happen to use drugs at one point in their life. And they, you know, I never see people as bad people, just people that made bad choices. So.
Yeah. And I think the whole thing for me is recognizing it wasn't a choice to become addicted, any more than when I had knee surgery and I had Vicodin, it did nothing to fix my pain. Like, my physiology just did not respond the same way. And that wasn't my choice. And so that is something that was another thing for me to kind of change my mindset about how I saw my husband with all of this. And another thing that I wanted to say was about how harm reduction came into our lives. And Darryl, do you want to talk about harm reduction? Because I think probably you could do a better job than me because of how it's really helped you.
I had the unique opportunity of coming into recovery, at least finding recovery through a program, Teen Challenge. And Teen Challenge is a 15-month residential Christian drug and alcohol treatment program. And it was a great program. One of the things about my addiction that I didn't know is that a lot of it was driven by just pain management, wanting to manage my pain. And coming from that program of Teen Challenge, they were very much, faith-based, Jesus will heal you kind of group, and they don't really want you taking psych meds. So that was my experience with recovery. You just came in, and that meant sobriety. And had that been my experience, I would not be here today. When I was having those 6 hip dislocations, 3 surgeries, I mean, I didn't know what else to do. So had I stayed, I wouldn't have been able to deal with the pain. I needed pain management. Now I thought, which was weird, because, you have all these pain issues, and then now you're with a different group of doctors, and their answer is that they're going to give you twice as much pain meds because your brain's already been affected. So, imagine the addict brain that would love the sound of that. Oh, by the way, we're going to up it and give you twice the amount now because, like last time it didn't work out. So, but had I held on to that abstinence only mindset, I wouldn't be here. And I see so many people that the importance of being medically supported, either for a short period of time or for a lifetime. And the way I look at it, if I had a loved one who had a heart condition, I'd want them to do everything in their power to help my loved one. And I feel like we miss that point when it comes to people with substance use disorder and alcoholism. It's like, well, they got themselves into this mess, they should get them out of this mess. And everybody needs supports, whether we realize we have them or not. Some people have such natural supports, they just don't even realize they have them.
And I think for me, like, I grew up in that just say no generation. So abstinence was the only way, and it took a long time. And a doctor telling me, she held it in her hand, like, and she goes, this much Dilaudid will kill your husband. He could smoke a joint the size of that telephone pole and it's not going to kill him. That's what she said to me. And because we're seeing them about therapeutic cannabis and pain management, because, there's been a lot of studies now to show that that's a great alternative for pain management for some people. So contrary to my upbringing, and that's what she said to me. Do you want your husband to live or die? And that was, a hard thing for me. And, and again, I said, my faith plays a big part in this. And when I started looking at harm reduction and then looking at the sanctity of life, one of those values that I hold, for people that are living, like my husband, where did that programming come from that therapeutic cannabis was not okay? When I'm okay with this much Dilaudid, that could kill him. Like it's programming that I've experienced. So next slide. So just, this idea that I don't promote drug use, I don't promote car accidents either, but I still think seatbelts are a good idea. When I think of harm reduction, I think about, my son and my daughter both have their motorcycle licenses. So do I actually. I promote using a helmet, because I don't want them to die when they ride their motorcycle. I prefer they not ride motorcycles, but I'm not going to stop them from riding motorcycles, so what can I do to reduce the risk of harm? And that's kind of how my whole approach to actually recovery supports, in fact, now allows me to look at things that I was horrified at the idea of, like needle exchange, or buying needles at pharmacies, but now I realize, like, people are going to do that. How can we reduce the harm that happens to their lives? And even just support people who use drugs without condemning them, because I used to even look at harm reduction as a means to an end, like, well, I'll reduce harm until you get there kind of thing. And then just realize harm reduction should just be harm reduction for the sake of harm reduction. And I should stop judging people, and it's been a process for me to kind of get there. So it was a hard thing for, I think, both of us to wrap our minds around, because like Darryl said, the program he went through was abstinence only, so, when he left that program, he still had no job, was homeless, and fell right back in. And I just think to myself, well, of course he did, and I use this example when we train, I think in the other program, that, if you take a sick tree and plant it into healthy soil for 30 days and then put it back in the same sick soil, of course it's going to get sick again, so if we think of life in general, that the person lives in the context of a family, in the context of a community, you can see how the family support can be so important for families to be an asset to an individual's recovery versus a detriment. And I think that's that question, what do you need to succeed? That we should ask both the individual and the family. For us, that peer support and family support, for me, desperation, that doctor, showing me, the visual around the cannabis, tapping into my education and recognition of my programming and wanting my husband to live. I, of course, still catch myself trying to force solutions on him because, I feel like, he had a couple of bad pain days. I'm like, why haven't you tried the acupuncturist, honey? For the 10th time I say that, and he's like, yeah, get away from me. You're still trying to force solutions on me. So we still have those conversations, and then for him, he had that desperation, the doctor educating him about therapeutic cannabis, and the fact that he wanted to live in recovery without doing things illegal to try to manage his pain, so that was kind of huge for us. And I think that we're on the last slide for this part of it. Yeah. So where we at today, we're still together, living life, thanking God for that, because Darryl did experience a couple of overdoses, or three overdoses with us. And we know that we're some of the fortunate ones because, like I said, my neighbor, passed away. I actually had another neighbor pass away. And of course, in the work that we do, doing peer recovery supports, we've seen a lot of families, that they're not going to have the chance for that reconciliation and opportunity to, restore their families. And it's heartbreaking to me because what I have come to see is that we have created these communities where drugs and alcohol are everywhere. But we have not created communities where people are welcome and able to access support to sustain recovery. We haven't done that. And I don't understand why. When I look at the realities of it all, we have created such disparities. There's been no equity for people affected by substance use. And it's been for decades. And, sadly, we're seeing it today because of who it's affecting today, and we should not have ever gotten here. And that's the sad part. There's a great movie called Anonymous People that kind of gives a history that kind of shows where all that stigma comes from and how we all got programmed a certain type of way around this stuff. And, I don't know. I'm grateful to be here and I'm thankful to Be Strong Families for kind of creating this Recovering Together deck. I think, Robin, you're going to talk a little bit about it, that has made all of the difference for for us. So thank you. Darryl, you got anything else to add, or you good? All right.
All right, so before we start to wrap up, I just kind of want to take a couple questions, or I want to ask a couple questions, and just kind of, you know, wrap this. This wasn't a really emotional topic for me. I just have the utmost respect for the Lennons and the way that they continuously are looking for solutions and for things that are going to, you know, support instead of judge. We teach a class at Be Strong Families, and we talk about positive thoughts and actions and words. And one of those is allowing without judging. And it just kind of encapsulates, Michelle, what I think here, allowing without judging, and not divorcing your husband. I don't know what a better word is. You know, like the emergency room said, have you divorced him yet? That disconnecting thinking drives me crazy about our society. And
I can't tell. I mean, we have threatened that to each other.
I'm sure,
you know, multiple times, you know, and even today, like we've kind of separated our lives a little bit more because we were so involved with each other. We were making each other crazy. And it just seems like things are getting better every day, you know.
Awesome. Kudos to you guys. And thank you so much. Does anybody have any comments, questions, or just insights they'd like to put in the chat or raise their hand? I did see, Cindy, that you said, I had a similar experience with my daughter after an accident. That was when Michelle was talking about her daughter having, you know, the opioid drip, and she's saying, no. I had an experience like that too. I had my wisdom teeth out, then I had my gallbladder out, and then I had a C-section. And after my C-section, I had, they put me on Vicodin all 3 times. And on the C-section, I went to the movies, forgot to take my Vicodin, and my hand started shaking. I was like, absolutely not. And thankfully, I was able just to, you know, put it down and tell my doctors no. But every doctor I go to for pain, for anything, will say, would you like some Vicodin? And the answer is always no. Anybody else have any questions, comments? If not, Andrew, you could probably run the poll. All right, there's a poll up. If you guys would fill that out, that would be great. We're always looking for cool content. And as you know, we have this Amplify thing going down. And so in the chat, if you could type #Amplify and then something that is going to stick with you about this webinar today. What are you going to amplify about this? Remember, we brought you this webinar as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion. And diversity, equity, and inclusion is all encompassing. It's not about race or ethnicity or language or ability or non-ability or education. It's about all people being included and all people being equitable. Okay, so we have Kristen Martin saying, wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing your story. Lawan saying, amplified love. Thank you, Lawan. Anybody else got a hashtag here? I'm gonna write mine in, and I think mine is amplified strength today. Amplify acceptance. Thank you, Cindy. Amplify caring. Great. All right. All right, so this slide is just, if you were with us on Monday, you heard me talk at length about our Recovering Together Cafe initiative. And this is a joint initiative between Be Strong Families, NET, and Greater Tilton, which is where Michelle is the executive director, together with 63 lived experience experts and professional experts. We came up with the Recovering Together Cafe questions. These questions all are surrounding the domains of vitality, which are very tightly connected to the protective factors. So if you have not seen that box, use that QR code, zip it up, and get one for yourselves today. Also, November 30th, December 1st, December 2nd, Michelle and our partner Cynthia and myself will be presenting our 3-day online Recovering Together team training. If you're interested, if your agency is interested, you need a team of 4 to 6 people. The link is in the chat. Andrew so nicely put it there. Also, if you are somebody who could use a QR code, you can zip that and get more information. The rest of the week, we have tomorrow with Hector Salazar, our Spanish webinar. And on Friday, a taste of the Recovering Together Cafe. If you want to register for that, I would love to see you there. We will have 1.5 hours of sharing stories of our experiences and hope. And last is our YouTube. If you are looking to see good content that we have saved from all of our webinars, please head over to our YouTube. Subscribe to us. There is a link and again, a QR code. On behalf of Be Strong Families, myself, Michelle, and Darryl, thank you guys. Thanks so much, Andrew, for being in the background and putting all of the links in and taking care of the tech stuff. We appreciate you, and we'll